Welcome to Reading Between the Reels. I'm Matt Leader.
And I'm Craig Dickinson. Today on the show, we're going to take a look at Suicide Squad, the 2015 film from David Ayer. I thought this would be a really good time to take a look at this as coming out next week based on the time this episode is released. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, the reboot / sequel. We're not sure yet because we haven't seen it. The new version is coming out, so this felt like a very timely thing to look at. So Matt, why don't you lay your overall thoughts on us? What did you think about Suicide Squad on this rewatch?
Well, I got to say that it was about as painful as having my wisdom teeth removed. I had to watch it over the course of 2 days. This, I think, is almost anti-cinema. The first half is like a poor music video after like music video after music video, and the second half is like, I think it puts B films. B films are much higher quality. I've seen many B films that have better shot continuity, editing, narrative, plot structure. It was physically painful for me to watch this movie. It is just horrible. I mean, there's not really any two ways about it for me. And I'm actually really excited for The Suicide Squad from James Gunn. I think that James Gunn has a proven track record, especially with kind of team up films. Obviously, he has the Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think are fantastic films. I think Guardians of the Galaxy is probably one of the true 10 out of 10 films in the MCU. I think it's a perfect film that you could show literally anybody. I've rewatched it a number of times and it holds up. It is honestly one of the best films that I've seen. And I'm excited to see what he can do, because this was absolutely horrible. I cannot describe how much I hate this film. How do you feel, Craig?
Well, I'm going to ask you to try and describe how much you hate this film, which is the beauty of what we're doing. I think I just need to keep coming up with movies you hate, because it's going to make for good conversation. And this must be rough after coming off, the last venting that we did. You know what? And I know that you watched the theatrical edition. Is that correct?
So I watched whatever is on HBO Max.
Yeah, I think that's the theatrical edition. I think that's the mainstream. The extended edition, which is on the Blu-ray and digitally, is far less known. There's about 10 to 15 minutes left additional film to that one, and that's the one that I watched. That's the one that I always watch, and I like this film. I actually had a really good time. I watched it in one sitting. I've seen this film a number of times, saw it in the theater and enjoyed it. But I do like the extended edition a lot more. There is a handful of things, and I think we might have talked about this off air before, that I think that you might enjoy about the extended edition. When we get into cinematography, there's one of my favorite shots is actually from the extended edition, which I was watching it and then did some research and was like, oh, well, that's a shot that Matt didn't see. So that'll be interesting to call out. But in essence, there's a lot more Harley Quinn and Joker stuff in the extended edition. I think that's really the appeal to that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, there's more of her backstory. And also when they're walking through the city, walking through the rubble and stuff, that you see her actually kind of psychoanalyzing some of the people, which I think that's just a fascinating characterization to remind us that she's not just a psychopath, but she's actually, a genius. She's a doctor and she's done, psychiatry. And so she's doing what she knows how to do. And it just adds a whole layer to her character. So it's fun to see that in this film. You see that a little bit in Birds of Prey as well. But I think that was a fun addition to this. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that, really neither of those additions is really the director's vision, which is, kind of a rough thing, that David Ayer, the director and writer of this film, did not have final say on the cut. And so, there is this rumored Ayer cut out there. that is, in kind of a similar way to Zack Snyder's Justice League, that there's this true version of the film, according to the director, that we may or may never see, may or may not see. But so it's kind of, we're penalizing the film for what it is, I think, much more than, what the intent was, at least from the original writer and director. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, we can only talk about what we have. And I know from, when this came out, there was at least, I don't know if this was 100% confirmed or if this was just rumors, that Warner Brothers had hired a trailer company essentially to cut the trailer for Suicide Squad. And were so impressed with it that they asked them to do a cut of the whole entire film. And I don't know if we ever found out how much of the trailer company cut is in the theatrical release. And so I think that is still up in the air. And I don't know, but this has a ton of problems that I really want to dive into. But I do want to say that the best part of the movie is the casting. I think the performances really across the board, there was not any performance that felt they were all pretty good. On second thought, I think the only one I would maybe criticize is Enchantress. I think the actress is Cara Delevingne, but I don't think it was anything that she had to do. I think it was the way her character was written. I don't think she was given much to work with. But like Will Smith is very charming. He's kind of playing himself, but that's fine. He kind of has this inherent charm about him. Harley Quinn is, I think, the definitive live action Harley Quinn. Or Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn is really the definitive Harley Quinn. I think she hits the kind of accent, mannerisms, all that. She knocks it out of the park. The rest of the Suicide Squad, I think, is totally fine as far as the performances. So I do have to say that was the best part of the film. I know that Harley Quinn is a fairly big character in some of the following movies. I think Jared Leto's Joker was entirely unnecessary in this movie, but I think the performance was just fine. I don't particularly like all of the costume decisions, like the damaged tattoo, like I think is on his forehead. I think is just a little on the nose, but it's like, that's something I can overlook. I don't think it like ruins the movie or anything. His performance is fine. I don't think the script is written in a way that really makes Joker necessary.
Yeah, it's first off, I want to say that I'm genuinely surprised that you like Jared Leto's Joker, because that's that's one of those things that's very controversial about this film. A lot of people don't like it. I like it, and it's interesting you mentioned the damage tattoo, which is missing when he shows up in the future stuff in Justice League.
And I do want to say,
yeah,
I don't mind his performance. I think that they could have easily cut Joker out or expanded his role, but it kind of feels like it's in the middle ground of both not enough and too much.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's the one thing that's a plus. One of the things that's a plus about that extended edition, like I mentioned, that there is more Joker, and that's one of the things that's rumored to be a lot more Joker in the director's cut, which we have not yet seen. But I do think that the best way to look at this film is as a world building film, as far as like Batman's rogues gallery. There's a ton of that in this film, and that's one of my favorite things about this film is the flashbacks with Batman in it, especially the one with him and Joker and Harley. I love when he punches her in the face when she slashes at him underwater. I just thought that's just so Batman. It's just great. And they have him with Deadshot, and there's a great Flash cameo with Captain Boomerang's introduction. And again, Jai Courtney, I've seen him in a bunch of different stuff. Generally don't care for him, but I think that his performance, I should say, seems like a fine gentleman, but didn't like his performances. But in this one, he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. And I think, for what it is, he's very charismatic. I've read in some interviews, the director said, just be a dirtbag, and he nails that. It's a great piece of casting as well. But I really liked the music. I know you said that like you felt like it was like a lot of music videos at the beginning. I liked the stylized character introductions with kind of the almost looked like the back of a baseball card thrown up on the side. I thought those were kind of cool. I like Rick Flags, especially it pops up there and it's like he's like a 3 handicap in golf. Some of that stuff I think is just hilarious, and I really like the music. I mean, especially when they come in. Amanda Waller is if you don't know who that character is from the comics, you just figure she's some government official. She's probably a good guy, and she gets sympathy for the devil is her is her needle drop, and like yeah, she is not a good person, and she just chews scenery. We haven't mentioned her yet. Viola Davis is, she's amazing in this film. As I mean, you can't even really call her an anti-hero. I mean, she's just straight out evil, and yet she's, I guess, on the good guy's side, right? It's very gray in this. It reminds me a little bit of like Pulp Fiction. If you were to ask like who's the good guy in Pulp Fiction, good luck. I guess Bruce Willis's character, maybe it's Butch, but they're all bad guys in this.
So, the music, I felt like you could have turned on any kind of pop rock, classic rock radio station, and it would have been the soundtrack for this movie. I did, think about some of the original score because, there's a handful of moments where the original score comes in. And as we talk about, the score of the film is very much the emotion of the film. And it felt so forced and artificial when the original score popped in. There was nothing particularly wrong with it. But I was just very, very aware of the manipulation of, when the heroic music comes on, when the Suicide Squad is at the end of the, film, and they're all walking in slow motion together. And it's like, you're not a team. You don't like each other. You're barely characters. I shouldn't even say that. They're not characters. They're caricatures. And no, I didn't like it. The music, it was on the nose, and I don't know. It'd be fine for like a little vignette that they released like before the film. You mentioned like the introductions, and that's something that I wanted to talk about. I actually like the comparison to baseball cards. I think that's like very fitting for the introductions. And, by themselves, I think it was just fine. But there's like 3 introductions or 4 introductions or 5 introductions in the film. Because really we get an intro for both Deadshot and Harley and kind of Waller at the very beginning. And then it goes into kind of the baseball card introductions when she's flipping through the files, right? And then that's over. And I think we're like 40 minutes into the film or something by the time those introductions are over. It's something like that, or 30 minutes maybe. But then we have almost like another introduction to Deadshot when he's at the rifle range. And then just when you think that those introductions are over, we get like an introduction to Katana. It's like, oh yeah, we forgot about her. We got to introduce her real quick. And every single one of those are exposition dumps. And even though they are flashbacks, so we do see some of it, just by the very nature of it, it is kind of more tell than show, right? We don't see these characters organically interacting with one another. And we kind of see these little montage flashbacks to a little bit of their background. And then we get another introduction. I think it's like 45 minutes into the film with, is it Slipknot, or is that the band? What's...
he dies so quickly. So I don't, did
it's the one who can climb anything.
I believe so. Yes.
And so it's like, and then there's like one more, just thrown in there for giggles. And I think if you had trimmed it down, because the movie's like 2 hours long. So it's like they could have afforded to cut 10, 15 minutes from this, or maybe replaced it with some of the, some other footage. But it's like, we don't need 3 introductions to Deadshot. I want to see Deadshot interacting organically with the characters. Something that is so simple, but I think is completely bungled in this movie is just simple cause and effect storytelling, where the characters have, or setup and payoff, where it's like the characters do or say something and it's paid off later in the film. An example of this would be when Boomerang, he has the fetish for pink unicorns. Okay, whatever. That's silly. That's fine, right? And then he stuffs it into his jacket. And then later in the film, he gets stabbed, right? And you can kind of see he doesn't really get hurt. It like hits something in his jacket. And so the setup was him putting the pink unicorn into his jacket. And the payoff should have been when the knife hit the pink unicorn, right? And that's the joke where the pink unicorn saves his life. But it's not a pink unicorn. It's a stack of cash. And it's like, this is basic stuff. Like you're doing all the work in the intros of setting this stuff up, and then you just don't pay it off. It is really unsatisfying. So that's where it's like the introductions, I think were fine in the beginning. They're not my favorite, but it's okay, right? And in my mind, I can't help but kind of compare it a little bit to Guardians of the Galaxy, because they are different, because I think that Guardians is more of like misfits and jerks, essentially, right? To keep it PG.
Exactly.
Coming together, right? They're not the nicest people, but there's a sense of humanity that they all have, right? And that film really shows and highlights their humanity. There's a little moment when Rocket Raccoon gets like drunk at the bar, and he kind of opens up very briefly, and you see how hurt he is. And just that little moment is a moment of humanity that I don't really see matched in this film. And there's no one to root for. I don't think any of the characters are good people. I don't think any of them are really likable. And there's like this, like you talked about how Waller was evil. And I completely agree. And it's pretty well established that the guards at the prison, Belle Reeve or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Are pretty evil as well. I mean, they are pretty sadistic. They torture the inmates, regardless of how bad they are. That's pretty evil, the torture, right? And there's more set up, like at the very beginning of the movie when Deadshot talks about how, like, some way, somehow, I'm going to rain down on you, on that lead prison guard. And then we never get any payoff for all the kind of torture and stuff that, these guards put them through. And so it's kind of, again, unsatisfying, where it's like they never get their comeuppance. They're just desserts. And so, am I supposed to root against Waller and the prison guards? Sure, I can kind of see that. But then it's like they're not part of the movie. There's no payoff to wanting me to root against them. Am I supposed to root for the Suicide Squad? I think I'm supposed to, but I don't really see, there's nothing I don't like any of them. I know, like, Deadshot has his daughter, but I don't think he's a very good dad. Like, I don't think that Deadshot should have like custody of his child. I don't, it tries to add this kind of pathos, this, empathy, but I don't really feel it for him.
Yeah.
I'm not sympathetic, because it's like he's not a great person. So,
well, he kills people for money.
Yeah.
But I do love the scene at the end with the geometry when he's teaching her like how he would take a shot. And that would be pretty engaging. Learning how to kill people. Like, that's all we need to do, kids. Like, let's learn how to shoot people through the wind and take into account all the geometry of that.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but it's like at the same time, that's kind of supposed to be like you're supposed to kind of empathize, right? Oh, he's hanging out with his daughter, but he's teaching her how to become an assassin.
Yeah.
Like,
no, you sympathize or empathize because he's Will Smith. and honestly, I forget. I'll forget that Will Smith is in this movie as much as he is, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, Will Smith. I love Will Smith, but therefore I root for Deadshot, right? Which, whether or not that's legitimate or not, that clearly doesn't work for you, but I think it works for some people. That's probably why he's in this film. I will say it's interesting that you bring up the scene in the bar in Guardians of the Galaxy, and I will say, I'm going to go and get another tangent real quickly. Is that when this film came out, it was definitely, it seems to me, that it was going to be DC's answer to Guardians of the Galaxy, especially with the music. I mean, it's the needle drops are very much
the bright colors. I mean, there's
it is that way, and it feels like some studio executive or executives, like again we talked about the trailer. Like, well, this is kind of what we want. It's getting that that response that it's kind of like Guardians. Like, let's make the whole movie like that. And who knows how much raw footage there was. I mean, we know with like the Snyder Cut, for instance, there was over 4 hours of stuff. I'm sure there was like he still didn't put everything in, even though we got the 4-hour version. Who knows how much footage we had of this film, and then they're just cutting and pasting it together. There is a lot of things that feel like it doesn't quite pay off because they're putting it together, and you have a trailer company supposedly that's putting this together, and it's interesting. Like none of them are credited either. You had officially it's edited by John Gilroy, who did films like The Bourne Legacy and Pacific Rim and Rogue One, films that we like, films that we enjoy. And yet it's kind of like he still has his name on it, but it's not his work. But I did want to say, again, I'm going to put my 2 cents in again for the extended edition, that the scene in the bar in this particular film is longer. That's another thing. And if there's a character in this film to root for, it's Diablo. You get a lot more of him in that scene. And you see that, he kills his wife and his kids, but not on purpose, right? He's kind of like the victim of circumstance. And you see in that film that even the rest of them kind of look at him like, oh, wow, that's horrible. And there's a little bit of sympathy for him in that scene. And that's whether it works or not, that seems to be the one primary scene where like, okay, they're not just thrown together. They actually have to choose, because you see at the end they walk out of the bar. It's like, okay, now, we might as well. And you can argue about character motivation at that point. Like, is it legitimate that they would now try and finish the mission? Maybe, maybe not. But that's the scene that's set up as since we're here, we might as well do the thing that we were brought in to do.
Yeah.
And it works better in the extended edition, mainly because of his story. And Rick Flag comes clean and says, here's what they're doing. Here's how they're manipulating me. And you kind of have a little bit of, I'm not that different from you. And so there's some kind of some bonding that happens in that scene.
I think you're right that I think Diablo is the most sympathetic character in the story. But it's kind of, in my opinion, messed up how the plot is around him. And one example of this is, Diablo does this horrible thing, kind of loses control. He doesn't kill his wife and kids on purpose, but loses control and ends up burning them. And so he vows to never use his power again in violence, right? And I think that is actually a very empathetic, sympathetic. It's like, okay, that's cool. I can dig that. But the entire movie, they're pushing him towards violence again. And so it's like, okay, so you have this person who kind of takes this vow against violence because he lost control and hurt his family. But then like Deadshot is continually pushing him to unleash himself, right? I think at the end, he even says like, maybe it's the boomerang, but Diablo says something like, what if I lose control again? And someone says back to him, then maybe we'll have a chance. So it's like they are pushing him to lose control, to be violent. And it's like, I don't know if that's a good message to be pushing. But then at the very end, when he's fighting the brother of Enchantress, he says, I lost one family. Diablo does. I lost one family. I'm not going to lose another. And then Deadshot says, think it through. So the entire movie, all the Suicide Squad are pushing Diablo to be violent, to use his powers. And you can argue, okay, he's using his powers for good. But then right at the end, it's like Deadshot says, no, don't do it. But that's directly contradicting what he spent the entire film doing. And then like I'm looking through my notes and, the bar scene, like Deadshot says at one point, Deadshot says, to honor among thieves. And like, he cheers his glass. But as we just talked about, he's not a thief. He's an assassin.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them are thieves per se. right?
Boomerang is.
Okay, so Boomerang is. Yeah,
And
clearly because he was robbing
Harley stole
banks.
some stuff, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
not
it's like
that's not their typical.
to classify her as a thief
MO.
is kind of stretching it a little. Like she does thievery.
Yeah,
but she's not. That's not what she does.
I hear what you're saying.
And so it's like that doesn't make any sense. Honor among thieves, and maybe it's just a saying like like honor among bad people or something. But it's like what honor, like what code are we talking about? Like it's not established. And you talked about character motivation, which I also have an issue with because it's like, why would they go with Flag after the bar scene? Like there's no point. Like what's in it for them, really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's that, and that feels to me like there's some stuff missing that comes after that. And that's, I have to look at this as I watch this film and I think two things. One, I'm like, again, I'm excited for the Suicide Squad because I like the idea of putting these disposable characters together, and who knows what's going to happen. But I also am watching this going, I know there's a better film in here. I believe David Ayer when he says, look, I have this film and it's there. And it's, it was not supposed to be like this comedy, he says like, it's supposed to be this drama. And it feels like it's kind of just been chopped up. And I guess I feel that, empathy for him, for the writer and director. But I feel like I can kind of piece things together. I'm clearly much more forgiving of this film than you are, which is fine. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to expand what we did beyond Star Wars, to be able to do films like this and be like, you know what, I love it, I hate it, cool, let's talk about that. That'll be an interesting thing. I did want to kind of see I want to steer us back a little bit to kind of some of the film aspects to see if maybe there was things other than characterization and plot, if there was anything that you liked or that stuck out to you cinematography wise, because I had a couple things. I mean, there's the one, and it might have even been in the trailer, but the Deadshot's looking out the window of his cell at one point, and this is in the extended edition, so you didn't get to see it. And it's just this beautiful shot. You get first person view, him looking out, and it's heartbreaking the way it's shot. And you just see that he is stuck, but he can see, it's like 2 feet, 2 feet high by, 8 feet. That's all he sees. And it's a gorgeous shot. And you feel for him at the time because he's stuck, and that at least it feels at that point like he's regretful, at least of the fact that he's not with his daughter. And then, the shot of Joker and Harley in the vat, the bird's eye view of that, I really enjoy that shot too. I just think that's a cool looking shot with the colors swirling around. I wish this film had a lot more color in it. That is one of the things that I did note, that it's a lot of outdoors at night fighting, and it's kind of hard to see some of it. It's not really well lit in a lot of places, and that's frustrating. It's got that kind of muted Snyder-esque color palette, which I enjoy in certain things, but in this I kind of wanted to see a little bit more, and I thought that was frustrating. Did you have any things that you'd want to point out for cinematography?
I was no that when I'm watching these films, I'm paying attention. I'm trying to look for these film aspects that we talk about, but I'm also looking big picture at kind of the heart and the soul of the film, and for me, the characters they have to be there. I think the plot needs to make sense. All of these things that we talk about are in service to the story that's being told. But if the story that's being told is just complete crap, then all that stuff gets thrown out because it's in service to nothing.
Yeah. I'm just trying to have you find some nuggets.
No,
find some
no,
gold.
This movie brought me no joy.
Well, I'll throw in a couple more.
Okay.
From this. So I really like the Deadshot intro where he's shooting, when he shoots that guy and ricochets it off there. I love the first person of that. I think it's very engaging. I would enjoy a whole movie of that. I think that would have been a great spinoff to do and it's potentially still something they can do. They can bring him back. That's one of the reasons why Idris Elba is not playing Deadshot. He's playing a new character, Bloodsport. So I enjoyed Will Smith's performance. I enjoy Will Smith in just about everything, even movies that are horrible. But I liked the way that was shot. I thought it was really engaging with the first person point of view. One of the most don't know if it's notorious is the right word. One of the most memorable shots in this film is the bird's eye view of Joker lying in the circle of knives. That's just kind of an interesting looking shot. But this time, the one thing that jumped out at me a lot, and I know I'd seen it, but it felt more important this time, I guess, is that when you have the introduction to Killer Croc and they throw the goat into him to eat it. And then again, in the extended edition, it's a little bit longer. You see him taking the goat away and actually kind of hear him start eating it. And then you have this jump cut immediately to Waller eating a rare steak. And I thought that at least I thought was a brilliant way to show, not tell, that she's a monster too, just as much as he is, with just that quick little editing move.
I agree. That's not, a scene that I saw, but just from your description, I think, that's something that you look for. And I think that's some nice little bit of storytelling. I want to go back real quick to, the Joker and his relationship with Harley. You mentioned that shot with him and the knives and all the different objects and stuff. I do actually think that's a pretty iconic shot. I think that it sticks out as this very stylistic display, right? The composition and everything. And that's kind of what I feel like a lot of this movie is, the parts that I do think are positive, like that little moment there, is style over substance, because I just don't see anything in this movie that really, like I said, really deserves, the Joker being in it as much as he is. If you have like a little flashback of Harley's, intro, as it were, to becoming a villain, that's one thing. But I almost kind of wish that Joker was the big villain rather than Enchantress. And for me, I think Harley and Deadshot are the two kind of main bad Suicide Squad characters, right? The bad guys. And I think if you have Joker as the villain, you create some very interesting internal tension and drama for Harley and what she's going to do. What, is she going to choose the Joker or is she going to choose the Suicide Squad, right? And you have a little bit of that with June Moon and Flag, right? Because they're in love and the Enchantress has kind of taken over June Moon's body, possessed her. But something that an author wrote, Chuck Wendig, is that you can think of like character conflict as lines. And people who are allies are kind of like parallel lines pointing towards the same objective. They're both working towards the same goal. And when you have characters in conflict, they're kind of like perpendicular lines that cross each other. They're pointing at different goals and they intersect. And I feel like June Moon and Flag are both kind of parallel lines. Like the character of June Moon wants to be freed of Enchantress, and that's what Flag wants too, right? So they kind of both want the same thing. And even though June Moon is the enemy, it's not really June Moon. It's really Enchantress. It's just in Moon's body, right? And so it's like there's not really any kind of internal conflict or personal conflict between the two of them. They kind of both want the same thing. And I feel like you had the opportunity to do something really interesting with Harley and Joker, because Harley would be torn between wanting to, that kind of perfect life. And we see that vision in the movie of her having kind of the stay-at-home mom life with Joker, and the reality, which is that he is a horrible, disgusting person. And we all know that, right? It's Joker. But the relationship is, and very intentionally, meant to be abusive and horrific, not a good thing. And I feel like that would be such an interesting direction to go. And I just felt like it lacked that drama that is necessary for a good film.
No, I totally hear what you're saying. I think that just as common as people saying that they didn't like Jared Leto's Joker is people saying that they wish they had more of it. Mm-hmm. Which is, I like what you said earlier, about like either have them in the film barely in there, like this middle ground doesn't really work.
No,
that's rough. And I did want to ask, when the first time you saw this movie and there was the reveal that Enchantress is the big bad, was that something you saw coming? How did you feel about that issue in the plot?
I thought it was monumentally stupid. and it's all about the execution, because I think Enchantress could have been the big bad evil guy just fine, right? But then, and this goes to kind of my structural issues with the film, and again, why my mind isn't on kind of like cinematography and stuff like that is because it's not serving the story, because there is no story there. So, it's introduced Enchantress, and she's kind of this witch, kind of similar to Wanda Maximoff, right? Kind of magical.
Sure.
Okay, that works. That's fine. And Waller controls her because she has her heart. And you see that little briefcase with like the TNT and then the heart, right? And it's like, okay, so, that's the character's motivation to do Waller's bidding, is because if she doesn't, Waller will kill her. That makes sense. I mean, I think that works as a motivation. But then, like, she just like disappears, goes off and like steals the little statue of her brother, possesses some random guy in a subway, which, okay, she does that, whatever. And then Flag and June Moon go to investigate, and Enchantress takes her over and runs away, which we don't see, by the way. It's just told to us over like radio. And Waller takes like, I don't know if it's like a steak knife or a pen, and she like stabs Enchantress's heart.
Yeah.
Why didn't that stop her?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it's pretty well established in the film that
right.
her heart is like, she needs the heart, right?
Oh, I remember. Okay, so this is really interesting, because again, we watched different versions of the film.
Yeah.
Because there is a line in the extended edition about her. She's aware of that this is happening, and she asks her, but she takes some of her brother's power. So it is explained in the film, like, why that doesn't work.
So that was in the theatrical cut too.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah. That thing where she's like going to her brother and she's like, help me.
Okay.
Right.
So that's why she doesn't, she's aware. Well, it's at least to me in the version that I watched, it was fairly explicit that she knew that Waller was threatening her, and that at this point she has to basically siphon energy off of him.
So Waller stabs the heart, right?
Yeah.
And then she goes to her brother, but the heart is still there, because that's still kind of a big part of the end of the film, even after it was stabbed. because they say multiple times they need to get her heart in order to defeat her.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the very, very end, Flag takes his hands and like cracks the heart open.
Yes.
And that does defeat her.
Yes.
But it didn't earlier in the film.
It's because he did it out of love, man.
No.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
See, that's what I'm talking about with it's so stupid. Like, it does not work on like a structural level. Like, they didn't know what they were doing, and it's pretty obvious. And I think if they clean that up, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it works. So this movie actually reminded me of another film, a 2004 film called Mindhunters. And it has the American poet LL Cool J in it. And he has a line, and he says, I guess we found his weakness, bullets. And this movie, it doesn't have as good of a line as that, but it's kind of the same concept. How, are these metahumans? Because they make a big deal about how they need metahumans to defend themselves against a rogue Superman.
Sure.
But they defeat the other evil metahumans, Enchantress and her brother, not with the metahumans, but with bombs, explosions. They blow up the brother, and then they blow up Enchantress, and that's what defeats her. Yeah.
So I have a counterpoint on that, but I'll get to that now, because I do want to talk about some of the lines that I really enjoyed. Oh, well, you know what? That was a good time as any. That I did think that this movie showed at least a couple moments of self-awareness, similar to that, but like tongue in cheek. Like, that's just dumb. The LL Cool J line. At one point, Will Smith says, So let me guess, we're going to the swirling ring of trash in the sky, because why wouldn't we? I just thought like that made me laugh out loud. It's like, yes, it's stupid. There's a blue light from the sky, which for the longest time, like every single comic book movie had a blue light coming from or shooting into the sky. So that, that was great. He also says at one point, that is just a mean lady. And like, to me, that just slays me that he's talking about Waller in that regard.
I have one line that I thought I really enjoyed from Harley when she talks about seeing like the big swirly magic stuff. And she's like, is anybody else seeing this? I'm like, yeah, why? She's like, because I'm off my meds. that was a good line.
Yeah, that's a good one. I enjoy that. Anytime she plays up the fact that she's crazy.
Yes.
Like the voices told me to do that. No, that's not what they said.
Right.
That
was another good line too.
Yeah.
But again, it's like Harley was the best part of the film.
Yeah.
So
she is. I thought, just to kind of skip down really quickly to like body language, facial expressions, that she has, and some of it's makeup. She's just like cartoonishly large eyes and a grin.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's popping off the screen, which really he looks like a cartoon come to life, which makes sense when you realize that, yes, Matt, this film won an Academy Award. This is an Oscar winner, for best makeup and hairstyling. And I think, honestly, Harley's no small part of that.
Killer Croc too.
Yeah, I was going to say Killer Croc 2, like is amazing that they, it feels like a guy who's mutated into a crocodile type creature. So,
and I got to say that I totally believe that because I think the makeup and stuff was fantastic. But it then breaks my heart that so many of the bad guys are just kind of generic CGI baddies. And like the little human creature guys.
Yeah, I looked that up. Those guys are called the Eyes of the Adversary. Those guys their heads are covered in eyes.
Yeah. And then like Enchantress, I can't get out of my head those wavy used car sale people where she's just like waving in the air.
There's a little bit of that.
There's a lot of that. That's Enchantress for basically most of the film. And it looks terrible. And her brother looks like a CGI bad guy, which I can roll with, but he looks very similar to the bad guy. Is it the Sentinel or whatever from Thor?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I enjoyed that film. And so it's like the CGI didn't bother me. I didn't enjoy this movie and the CGI bothers me more. So it's like, but it's like one of those things where I can kind of take it or leave it.
Sure.
But so just going back to the lines real quick, at the end of the film, Flag says, we have the heart. We can end this.
Yeah.
Do you remember what happens next?
Because
they don't stab the heart. That's when they throw the explosives.
Throw the bomb. Because they also have to stop the big thing in the sky. They're swirling ring.
But wouldn't killing Enchantress stop that? Because she's like the source of the magic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to say that and then not do that.
So I'm gonna go super meta on you here. Okay. So here's the big thing that my big takeaway from watching this film was that the biggest reason, now it's stated by Waller that the whole purpose of Task Force X is, what if there's another Superman, or what if Superman would have been bad and came and ripped the whole house, the roof off the White House and all that stuff. So we need metahumans to combat it. I don't think that's the purpose at all. I think the whole point of this, and maybe I'm reading into this, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt, is that she wanted her own personalized army that she could do whatever she wanted with, because she's that vain. And that's why she's going to go get criminals, regardless of whether they have powers, because most of them don't even have powers. I mean, Deadshot is, supernaturally good with a gun, but Captain Boomerang is good with boomerangs, but they're not really metahumans, right?
Like against Diablo too.
Yeah, Diablo's like the only one. I mean, Killer Croc to a degree, but they're criminals. They're really good at being criminals, but she can do whatever she wants with them. She can, she holds their life literally in her hands with the nanite bombs and stuff. And so I think ultimately that's her pitch, to the government, that this is what she's doing. But I don't think it's that at all. I think she just wants the power to do that. And I think that there's an element to this that you see it's paid off at the end. For me, it's paid off because it does not work. And that's why you have, honestly, one of my favorite moments in the film is when Bruce Wayne shows up in the mid-credit scene. And it's like, yeah, you know what? You just need to let me and my friends handle this. So that's where, it's kind of these guys are like the stand-ins while we're getting the Justice League together. I mean, she even has files on Arthur Curry and on Barry Allen and stuff, the guys that ultimately become part of the Justice League. And so I think what you're saying that, they don't do metahuman stuff like to defeat, Enchantress and her brother. They literally do things that Rick Flag's SEAL team could have taken care of all that stuff. Right. But maybe that's the point.
I think that would have been a much better film. That is not the film that we got, but I do think that's a very good idea. And I think that would have been way more interesting.
Yeah.
Having Waller, I mean, you can kind of tell that she's kind of a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, that would make sense that she's using it for essentially personal gain.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about Superman going rogue. That's the excuse that she gives to the government to get permission to put this task force together. But that's not, and it's like, you can read that into the film, but it's not in the film. And I don't think you're far off, and I don't think the movie was far off from that.
Yeah.
But that's not what it was about, right?
Yeah.
Where, because they go and they save Waller and then they go save her again, or try to.
Yeah. There's 3 helicopter crashes in this film.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not one. It's 2, but 3.
Yeah. So it's like that, I think, would have been a much better film. And
maybe that's the film that he intended.
Yeah. And if so, I think that had possibility of being very, very good.
Yeah.
But that's not what we got.
Yeah.
And I think the movie is so choppy, structurally makes zero sense. It's repetitive. And the characters, I mean, without describing how they look, their, quote unquote, metahuman powers or their job, can you describe the characterization of the Suicide Squad?
I mean, some of them I can. I mean, like I said earlier, Captain Boomerang's a dirtbag. Right? He's just a slime ball. He is. Harley's manipulative. I mean, there's a few. I see what your point is. And,
yeah. But then there's also no character arc either. Like Boomerang, I kind of get the dirtbag thing. Okay. I think it could have been a little bit stronger, but I get that.
Yeah.
But it's like he stays a dirtbag. He doesn't change.
Well, yeah, he's a one-note dirtbag.
But that's not. It doesn't make me enjoy
the redemption
him in the movie. Well, yeah. But see, that's kind of the thing with, like, you take Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah,
they are also kind of dirtbags,
yeah.
right? And selfish and out for themselves, but they don't stay that way.
Yeah, so
they do heroic things, right? And so you grow to like them as they grow as individuals and as a quote unquote family.
Yeah,
and so it's like, this movie doesn't even try that, or it does kind of in the bar scene, but fails at it.
Yeah. So you really wanted redemption arcs for these horrible people.
I think you gotta do something with the film. So take your idea, right? Where it's like Waller is kind of the big bad.
Yeah.
And she wants this personal army. And they realize that, oh no, even though, Waller is terrible, and like, okay, we could save her, or we could try and defeat Enchantress and save the city, save the world, right? And it's like they choose to do that. I don't think that was there in the film. Like, even that is kind of doing something heroic,
right?
So yeah, if you want people to root for these people, you got to have something likable about them.
So again, one thing that I felt a lot as I was watching this was excitement for the Suicide Squad. And I think you feel that same way, that a lot of the things that it looked like either from the trailers or even embedded in this particular film that were promised seem to be, I mean, again, we haven't seen, the new film yet, seem to be part of what's to come.
Yeah.
Right. There might be, I mean, it looks like a little bit like even like Bloodsport's going to have a similar thing to Will Smith's character. I mean, that's kind of just the way that's going to be, because at one point it was going to be Deadshot, rewrote it, whatever. And that you kind of have this potential redemption arc for him. And then you don't have, at this point, the Justice League exists in the timeline. So being able to say, hey, I need to make sure I'm able to, protect us against another Superman is not a legitimate reason to reform the Suicide Squad. And so it'll be interesting to see what the rationale is if we get a scene like that where, I'm going to try this again. How's this going to work? But we're definitely, the rumor is we're going to get a lot more deaths in that film.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot more violent. And I think that there's just a lot of things I can kind of see. And honestly, I think watching this film, watching Suicide Squad, I was anticipating the Suicide Squad and seeing, okay, I enjoyed this more because I know kind of where it's going or where I anticipate it going in the next film, which again, they've said, it's not a sequel. I mean, yeah, it's later in the timeline and there's the same characters and actors who portrayed them from the previous film. So nature of the beast, that makes it a sequel. I mean, that's like saying, like the early James Bond films weren't sequels. I mean, yeah.
Yes
I mean,
and no.
Yes and no. Like not in any, it's not important either way.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you directly contradict something. It's like if it's the first time Rick Flag and Harley Quinn meet each other, then that's a contradiction.
Sure.
I don't think we'll get any of that. But it does feel a lot of ways like we're going to get a do-over.
Mm-hmm. I think Suicide Squad from David Ayer needed massive structural changes. It needed the script to be rewritten in large parts, but you had ingredients there that would have worked in a much better film. And that was, there isn't much I liked about the movie, but I think there is a movie that you could have created from the Suicide Squad. If you had, restructured it and rewritten the story a little bit and smoothed the edges off a little bit. And that's where I'm kind of coming into the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn film. I'm hoping they figure that stuff out. And based on James Gunn's work, I believe that he will pull it off. And I think we'll get a very good film out of this. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just from interviews I've heard from James Gunn, it sounds like Warner Brothers was very hands off and basically just said, do whatever you want to do. And having worked for both DC and worked for Kevin Feige over at Marvel, and we talked about a little bit this off air that Marvel is very consistent, and we'll talk about this at some point in some of the films we look at. And part of that is because Kevin Feige is very, for lack of a better word, rigid about how a Marvel film feels, right, and looks and those kind of things. Where for good or for bad, but at this point, without having that overarching supervision, he's going to make the film that he wants to make. And that seems to be what's happening with what sounds to be a very violent, not family friendly, but I'm excited to see it, The Suicide Squad. So Matt, any other final thoughts about 2015's Suicide Squad? It's hard. It's hard not to say The Suicide Squad, but that's not the film we're doing yet. I have a question for you though, real quick. Yeah. So if at some point the Ayer cut is released, HBO Max, whatever form it takes, would you watch it?
Yeah, and I watched the Snyder cut. I'm not a huge fan of Snyder. I think the Snyder cut of the Justice League was a much better film. I also think it's a lot easier to get the film right when you've had like 3 years of critique and feedback. And it's like you do it once and then you do it twice. Yeah, I'd hope it'd be better. And I still have issues with that film. I don't think it's a great film, but I think it is significantly better. I've seen some of David Ayer's other films, and although I do think that they were better, I wasn't a huge fan of his work, but I do think that they were better films, and that's what I would expect an Ayer cut to be, better, but not great. And of course, I could be wrong. You never know. I definitely would watch it. I think that this was an absolute mess. I hated it, and I'd be very happy to never see it again. Those are my final thoughts.
There you go. Well, I'm really glad that I made you watch it. And I'm sure at some point you will get me back by making me watch something that I hate.
Absolutely.
Although I'm looking
forward to it.
That sounds awesome.
So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you would like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook, or you can email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com.
And if you haven't yet, please join our Facebook group. It's a safe place to share your thoughts and discuss all things related to movies.